Welcome to the Northeastern University School of Law Guide to Paper Research. In this video podcast, we will go over the basics of conducting paper research, including how to find important sources in Northeastern's law library. In order to help explain the process of conducting legal research without any internet whatsoever, we're going to use a hypothetical. You're on co-op at an environmental law firm. Your supervisor is putting together a case against a company known to release significant amounts of greenhouse gases. She is bringing the case under the Clean Air Act. She comes to you and asks you to find the requirements for notice in a citizen's suit, a suit authorized by the Act, brought by citizens to compel action by either a private organization or a public agency. Your supervisor asks that you find the relevant parts of the statute, any attendant regulations, and some case law to support your findings. She asks that you have all of this before she returns to the office at the end of the day. As soon as she leaves the office, all the power goes off. Now you have to rely on those books you studied near on your academic quarters. So what do? Turns out, all the sources you're looking for are here at NUSL's Law Library. When you walk into the library's first floor, the elevator will be to the left. Go to the fourth floor. When you walk out of the elevator, you're going to want to essentially turn around and go right towards the opposite side of the library. Walk back, and eventually you'll be here at the federal materials. State materials, including Massachusetts, are more spread out, but will be towards the left once you leave the elevator on the fourth floor. If you have any trouble, don't hesitate to ask your librarians. They are here to help you. You already know that your supervisor is bringing suit under the Clean Air Act. However, you may not know much about the relevant law and may want to get an overview of it. Secondary sources can be helpful for this and are often the best starting point when beginning your research, particularly if you are not seeking specific resources. Secondary sources include legal encyclopedias, treatises, hornbooks, legal periodicals, and practice materials. These resources can provide broad, basic information for the topic you're researching, and may help frame your issue. Furthermore, secondary sources can often lead you to further and more specific resources. In the library, these are located on the fourth floor in the rows near the primary materials. At some point, you're going to want to look at the text of the Clean Air Act itself. When acts are passed, they are organized into the 52 titles of the United States Code. You could choose to look directly in the volumes of the United States Code, which are published by the Government Printing Office and released every 6 years and updated annually. This is the official source of the code. You may find it more helpful, however, to look at the code's annotated versions. The two most popular annotated codes are West's United States Code Annotated, cited to as USCA, and Lexis United States Code Service, cited to as USCS. All annotated versions of the code include helpful summaries of court decisions and references to regulations and other commentary involving the statute, all of which can help you understand the statute and find other useful authority. Here at NUSL, the library has both West's annotated code and Lexis's annotated code right next to it. To find the text of the Clean Air Act, first look in the code's index for key terms. The index is generally the book placed last in whichever set you are using, towards the bottom right. The index is your starting point, whether you have a specific statute in mind but don't know the citation, or are starting with a broader idea. The index allows you to search by keywords arranged alphabetically. By looking in the index at keywords, you can then find the specific sections of the code that relate to the topic you're researching. So to start, think of keywords you might use to begin your research. In this case, the most evident term would be clean air, but you could also search under a broader topic like air pollution, should you not have the name of a specific act. Using West's code, when we look in the index, it points us right to where we need to look. Title 42, Section 7401 et sec. Et sec is an abbreviation for et sequentius, which is Latin for and following. Title 42 is broken up into a number of different volumes, but we can locate the volume we need by looking for the section number. When we open up the annotated code directly to Section 7401, the statute begins. We see that Section 7401 itself is actually just congressional findings and declaration of purpose. However, we know we must be in the right place, not only because the index took us here, but because we can see that this chapter, Chapter 85, is entitled Air Pollution Prevention. If we go back just a few pages, we can see a table of contents listing the name of each section under this chapter. Go through this table before the chapter to find sections that look relevant to what you need. A section that looks very relevant for our purposes is Section 7604 under Subchapter 3, General Provisions. Our book ends at Section 7430, so we must go to the next one. In the next book, you'll go directly to Section 7604 and look through it. You'll see that Section B governs notice. At the end of Section B, you see that notice under this subsection shall be given in such manner as the administrator shall prescribe by regulation. This language begs the question, who is the administrator? It's generally a good practice to just look around a statute to see if there is anything else relevant and important in understanding what you've already found. In this case, section 7602, definitions, might help. We can see here that the term administrator means the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. Now we have no doubt that it's time to head into regulations. But before you do, you may find it helpful to look at the annotations after this section. The annotations include a bunch of helpful pointers. Annotations include cross-references to other statutes that may be relevant to your section. They include historical references indicating when the statute was passed, if and when the statute has been amended, and committee reports associated with the statute. Annotations also show us that our section is section 304 of the Act as it was initially published. Additionally, annotations will compile relevant secondary sources, leading the researcher to encyclopedias, treatises, and digests related to the statutory section. They also may have references to regulations associated with the statute. Finally, the Notes and Decisions section contains, as the title suggests, short notes about cases relevant to the statute organized by issue. In West's annotated code, you find that under Notes and Decisions, notes 25 to 29 appear particularly relevant. In Note 19 of Lexis Code Service, you also find a bunch of useful cases explaining the purposes of the notice requirement and the consequences of violating it. These may include some cases that your supervisor will want to know about. You may have also noticed the pocket parts tucked into the ends of these books. When acts are codified after the set has been printed, publishers will release updates to the codes and updates to annotations in small supplements and mail them out to law libraries. It's important to check these as they may point you to relevant and important recent decisions. In our case, there seem to be no updates relevant to the notice requirement. Before we move on, we should note that while statutes are often referenced by their placement in the United States Code, you can also read acts as they were written and released in the United States Statutes at Large, abbreviated STAT. The Statutes at Large is the official record of acts of Congress. As Congress passes laws, they are compiled into the Statutes at Large, which is organized chronologically from the very first session of Congress in 1789. The statutes at large are located here in the library, right next to West's annotated code. If the annotated code didn't provide us with any relevant regulations, we're not out of luck. What are regulations anyway? Regulations are legally binding rules promulgated by government agencies and departments pursuant to statutory grants of authority. Federal regulations are codified in the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR. Each state maintains its own code of regulations. For example, Massachusetts is known as the CMR, or Code of Massachusetts Regulations. The CFR is updated every year. 2012's version is black, 2013's version is red, and 2014's version is purple. When we look in the CFR's index, which is located at the end of the set, we will again search for key terms. When we look up Clean Air Act, the index redirects us to air pollution control. When we go to air pollution control, the index points us to a number of different regulatory provisions. We now have to look through to determine which areas may be relevant to our topic. As we look through, we can see there's a regulation that looks very relevant. Citizen suits, prior notice at 40 CFR 54, Volume 40, Part 54. Using the numbers in the upper corners of the pages, we can turn to the part we want. When we find it, we see that this regulation is going to give us a lot of useful information. We can rest even easier when we look lower to see that the authority by which this regulation was promulgated was Section 304 of the Clean Air Act, which was the statutory section we were just looking at. The regulation includes a section explaining the purpose of the regulation, a section describing how notice should be served, and a section describing what the contents of the notice should be. It's clear that this is definitely a regulation we should put in our memo. Directly next to the CFR is the Federal Register. The Federal Register is the official journal of the federal government and includes new agency rules, proposed rules, and public notices. The Register is published every day except federal holidays. Our library maintains Federal Register publications from the previous 3 to 4 years. You'll now want to look into how the courts have added definition to the parameters established by the statute and regulations by researching cases. Case law is comprised of opinions written by judges to explain their decisions and their underlying legal reasoning. These opinions, at least the published ones, are then bound into what are called reporters or reports. Reporters are a series of books containing court opinions. There are a number of different reporters, each covering case law from either a certain state, region, or court. For example, United States Reports is the official reporter of the United States Supreme Court. So U.S. Reports only contains opinions handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court. If, on the other hand, you needed to research Massachusetts case law, you wouldn't want to look at U.S. Reports or any federal reporter. Rather, you would need to look at reporters that publish Massachusetts court opinions, such as Massachusetts Reports, which publishes the Supreme Judicial Court's opinions, or the Northeastern Reporter. When citing the cases, you should consult your Blue Book to determine the proper reporter to cite to. Here at NUSL, you can find case reporters in generally the same area that you find codes and regulations. Any state reporters can be located near their respective state materials. The library has two reporters that cover a number of states, the Atlantic Reporter and the Northeastern Reporter. The Atlantic Reporter covers 10 states, including Connecticut, New Hampshire, and, although not a state, Washington, D.C. The Northeastern Reporter contains cases from 5 states, including Massachusetts and New York. Know, however, that neither of these reporters contains federal cases. Cases are arranged in reporters chronologically. That means that if you were to flip through a reporter, you could see an opinion about a civil rights violation, followed by an opinion resolving a contract dispute, and then one quieting title, all written by different judges. In other words, it would do you very little good to simply flip open a reporter and read until you found a case on point. That would take you forever and be wildly inefficient. So it's important to go into case law research with a plan. Cases can be searched by citation, name, or topic. You may want to start your research by topic. Case digests, published by West and corresponding only to West reporters, of which there are quite a few, are a helpful tool in searching by topic. Digests are organized alphabetically. Each topic within the digest includes a scope note, which will describe the subjects included and excluded in, and an analysis of, the topic. Next, there will be abstracts of points of law, or more basically, the issues that have arisen in that topic. These points of law are then assigned key numbers. The key numbers will help narrow down your search even more by compiling cases that deal with that narrow legal issue. The topics and key numbers will be the same across all reporters, but you do want to make sure that you're using the digest that goes with the reporter you need. Additionally, always be sure to check the pocket part, as that will have the most up-to-date information. In this instance, we have a pretty clear-cut topic to search: environmental law. Sometimes, however, the initial search term you use might not turn anything up, or a topic might not have any obvious search terms. The descriptive word index is a useful tool in those moments. The descriptive word index allows you to search for a topic, like environmental law, and see what words are related to that topic that will allow you to search in the case digests. For example, when you search environment in the Atlantic Reporter descriptive word index, you see that it lists a whole bunch of related words and topics like conservation, contamination, and hazardous. If the topic that you're researching is really broad, or you're just not turning anything up with existing search terms, the descriptive word index is a great tool. Let's assume that in addition to the federal research you've been conducting, you've also been asked to find out if any local states have a private cause of action against air polluters. Your boss seemed particularly interested in finding out if Connecticut or New Hampshire allow for citizen suits. Because the Atlantic Reporter is a national reporter that has case law from both states, that seemed like a logical place to conduct case research for this issue. Let's begin our research with a topic search. Because, as we mentioned, our topic is fairly clear, we can skip the descriptive word index and begin by consulting the Atlantic Case Digest. We will start by searching for environmental law in the digest's index at the beginning of the volume. Then we can narrow down our search by keynotes within that topic. We see that section 297 of the environmental law section covers private right of action, citizen suits, which looks promising. The citation of this keynote would start with 149E, as that's our topic number by which we found environment, followed by K297 for Keynote 297, delineating citizen suits. When we look at the compilation of sources, we see that there is indeed a case in Connecticut. Town of Greenwich should be Connecticut Transportation Authority, 348 A 2nd, 596, Connecticut, 1974. The case digest will also include a short summary about the case, which you can consult to determine if the case will be helpful. Before you move on to the reporter, always remember to check the pocket part to see if there has been anything added, as the pocket part will have the most up-to-date information. To find the case, we use the site provided, 348 A 2nd, 596. So now we have to interpret the site. A 2nd tells us that we will be looking at the Atlantic Reporter 2nd series. The first numerical, 348, refers to the volume number of the reporter we have to look at. The second numerical, 596, tells us the first page of the case in that volume. Voila, you've found a case. Now you just have to read it and determine if it aids you in your research. Even if this particular case isn't on point, there may be citations or authority within that case that is more relevant to your research. A case that may not necessarily be on point for your research could still be a good jumping off point to further resources. Keep in mind that even before you go to the case digest, you may already have some case citations that you know will be helpful. How? From the research you've already done, particularly in the annotated code and the secondary sources. The annotated code will cite to cases that are on point for various aspects of the statute, some of which may be relevant to your research. Secondary sources can also lead you to on-point primary law on the topic you're researching. Throughout all of your research, stay on the lookout for case citations that might be right on point for you. As we already mentioned, one of your best assets in law school can be your librarians, located on the 3rd floor. If there are any questions this video didn't cover, they will be able to help you. They're available here. Thank you for listening.